Hey gang, welcome back to Ken Michaels Radio, where the conversation is always on the Beatles. And we bring back Tom Frangione. I feel funny saying Frangione, but that's how Paul pronounced your last name. That's what we're going with.
And thus it shall be. Yes,
We ain't gonna change it.
that's right.
He has ordained
Who,
you.
who are you to play God? Yeah. How are you doing,
Anytime,
Kenny?
and good, good.
Good.
I was gonna say anytime that a Beatle mispronounces something, even in a song, that's how you pronounce it from.
That's right. That's right. Well,
Yeah.
again, I think I've told you this. It's not true. He actually got it right. In Italian, you pronounce every letter. Like my
Yeah.
father would tell you that that's the correct way. And I always just tell people, go watch The Godfather. Some people call him Don Corleone, and some people call him Don Corleone.
Right.
Same church, different pew.
So anyway, the last time we had Tom on, he was teasing us about this new program
Ooh.
that was being developed on the Beatles channel. And Tom is like all over the place on the Beatles channel. He was doing 5 shows. He's now doing 6.
Yep.
He lives and breathes Beatles. He doesn't
Yeah.
leave that room.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty much.
Uh,
Let me get my head out of the way. There's the Hollywood Bowl poster. No.
okay.
So yeah, we're real excited. We have a new series called Help from His Friends, Ringo Starr and the All-Star Band.
Mhm.
It's a series I've wanted to do for years, just, celebrate the history of this franchise. It's running longer than anything that came out of the Beatles. It's longer than Wings or the Wilburys or Plastic Ono or anything else. It's over 35 years. And, just doing it by the numbers, you got 4 dozen people who've been in and out of the band. Almost half of them are Rock and Roll Hall of Famers.
Mhm.
There are, close to 200 songs that they've done in and out of the set lists over the years. And I thought just always wanted to do it. And, it seems easy to say, well, you take the first tour and play one by everybody, then you go to the second tour and do one by everybody. But
Hmm.
we looking at that, it would be so front loaded, right? Just take the first tour, 8 people.
Right.
You're not going to get that done in a half hour. And then by the time they start recycling people who come back, do you go through the same songs again? And we said, the chronological thing didn't work. So what we did is came up with the idea of doing them thematically. So episode 1, for example, focused on the current guys in the band, right? Ringo's out on tour. So we have Ringo songs, of course. Ringo actually opens and closes each half-hour episode, and in between is the little all-star band sandwich. So in between this time around, you have Steve Lukather and Hamish Stewart and Colin Hay doing their songs.
Right.
And we I laid this thing out, and Ringo actually gave this series his blessing. There's been a couple times where he said, "Well, I don't want to leave anybody out," and all kinds of different red lights. We came up with this idea, and he said 2 conditions to do the show. One, that he can be involved and be interviewed for it. Okay, we can make that happen. Pretty sure we'll find the time for that.
Yeah.
And second, he was very pointed about this, saying, don't leave anyone out. Everyone has to be represented. And that opened up a really good dialogue with Ringo and his team because, well, we work in radio off of CDs and LPs. We work in an audio format.
Hmm.
We don't have licenses to be playing things off videos or unreleased things. You know how all that works, and there's a lot of red tape. And we said, look, not everybody who's been in and out of the band has had a song released on an album. There have been whole tours, and off the top of my head, I don't know why I picked them, but I said Graham Goldman from just a few years ago.
Good.
A great player, great songs. There's no CD, LP, or even video officially released
Mhm.
from Graham. They said, you make us a list of what you need, and we'll put it together for you. I'm like, that could be fun.
Uh-huh.
So my first big swipe at that was taking things that were from people who were represented on videos because we know those songs are mixed and they're professionally recorded and they're going to be available and we're good to go.
Uh-huh.
So we had that, but there was some like Graham. who, there was nothing, no video, no, I mean, they have it, I don't.
Hmm.
And they were very generous. Ringo's team was very, very generous with getting us whatever we wanted. And some of the dialogue, I have to tell this story. Um, Through the list of songs that we wanted, I said, gee, the one year, they didn't play here, but played overseas. They played in Russia, 1998. And that was the year he did songs from Vertical Man, including Love Me Do.
Hmm.
I'd like to have Ringo doing Love Me Do. I picked the show, Moscow, August 25th or whatever the date was. And they said, well, we don't have that show. And I said, well, I do. Uh, and it was, they definitely didn't want us playing, stuff off of YouTube and, cell phone videos. So they said, well, send it to us so we can hear, one, the fidelity and make sure it's the proper mix. And second, that the performance is something that they would sign off on. I said, okay, sure. It was a professionally mixed, it was for a radio broadcast in Moscow. So it was professionally, recorded or whatever. Sent it to them. They said, sure, you can have that. You can play that song on one condition. What's that? They said, you give us a copy of the rest of that show for Ringo's archive. I said, happy to help, can do. So that was kind of an interesting dynamic, and it opened up a good channel of, getting material back and forth. So, you look at like I don't know, 2010, you got Rick Derringer. You got to get something from him.
Hmm.
And there was a professionally recorded show from that tour, but it never came out. So we knew they had that. So it was a lot of digging, and you can imagine the number of checklists making sure we
Hmm.
got everybody. And then we said, look, there are going to be a handful of people who never took to the microphone. Jim Keltner, Zach Starkey,
Right.
etc. And he said, well, you'll figure out how to get them in. And of course we did. So, I don't know, we played Yellow Submarine from the new lineup. And like, guess who's playing the trumpet on the middle break there? That's drummer Greg Bisonet. We got everybody at least mentioned.
Hmm.
And quite literally, Ken, this is the thing I'm kind of most proud of just from the production point of view. The series had started while the band's on tour. And just a couple weeks ago, Colin Hay missed a show. He was sick. And
Yeah.
to keep the length of the show appropriate, the band did two songs. They added two songs that were played once, and that was it. During the middle break, the magical musical moment, that's the part without Ringo,
Right.
Steve Lukather led them through Little Wing by Jimi Hendrix. That's
Nice.
pretty cool. What's even cooler on two levels was the other song was one where they gave Buck Johnson the microphone.
Oh,
I said,
wow.
well, hold on now. He was in that bucket with Keltner and Zach of guys who can sing. I said, and the one rule he had was make sure everybody's represented. So, look, we could have easily punted and just said, well, the shows are recorded and they're produced and they're cut and they're voiced and off we go. But that we said, if you guys have that recorded, I can find a spot to put that in.
Uh-huh.
So it's in episode 8 or 9 or 10. It's a few weeks out. We're doing things like, I don't know, British rock favorites or something. I said we can slide in Buck Johnson taking the mic. He does a song. I knew it by Jeff Beck, off an early Jeff Beck album called Going Down.
Uh-huh.
It's a song that was written by Don Nix, who, some of your listeners will probably know, was one of the guys who helped George at Bangladesh. He put together the backup singers and things. But he's an American. But that song became like a blues standard for a lot of the British acts. So Jeff Beck did it. The Who has covered it. I know I have that on one of their, deluxe live albums. The Stones have done it live. So we
Uh-huh.
slid that in as kind of like a British blues favorite, but found room and said, okay, let's move Buck Johnson from, the support side up to the microphone. So it is a living, breathing show. We have unreleased music, as I explained, coming from the Ringo camp. Um, Ringo songs, all-star songs, and they're as recent as 2025. So we're keeping it fresh. My favorite part about writing it was I'd write the script and say, and welcome, to help from his friends. And Mark is, got a great personality. It comes through on the air. But there are nice big holes in the script that say, Mark, tell a story here about how you picked the songs or something like that.
Uh-huh.
So, we'd be talking about, choosing, the biggest hits or something. And, that'd be scripted. But then it says, Mark, you take it from here. Tell a story about how Ringo likes to have the songs picked or whatever. And
Hmm.
there's enough of those that give you a pretty cool peek behind the curtain. And we got some more behind the curtain stuff. We have all-star band rehearsals. There's so much here, however, whatever level you have collected Ringo and the All-Stars or followed them or gone to the concerts, there's stuff in here you haven't heard. Guaranteed.
Okay. Few questions.
Guaranteed. So it's a terrific series. We're all very, very proud of it.
Okay. Why a half hour instead of an hour?
Well, we looked at that originally. One of the things that got shot down is we said, well, let's do an all-star band special, like a 2 hour
Uh-huh.
thing. Okay. Too many people would be left out. We started looking at an hour. The issue there is certainly there's more than one song from everybody we could pick. They all generally do two or three. But the issue is it is the Beatles channel. As much as I would make that show appointment listening and appointment radio, not everybody does. And you have to think about the person who gets in the car after work or is taking the kids to soccer practice or is running errands and they put the Beatle channel on. And you don't want to have, you know, half an hour or more maybe without a Beatle voice or a Beatles song,
Hmm.
right? I mean, it might sound like, the 60s channel for a while if you're playing, songs by all the 60s artists or the 70s channel or whatever. We do a couple of episodes that are era specific, like artists of the 80s and 90s. So you'll hear Richard Marx and Wally Palmer in that one and a couple others, but it's two or three songs and it's bookended by Ringo. So it keeps it very much as Ringo Starr, he of the Beatles,
Right.
and his all-star band. So it makes it manageable. Mathematically, it came out great. We said if we pick one by everybody and one or two little exceptions, so Frampton got an extra one because he covered a Beatles song. So we'll give a Peter original plus his cover of one of the Beatles tracks that he performed. We have a couple of guest spots. Big one from Radio City about 15 years ago.
Yes.
We've got that.
We were there.
So we laid it out and I said, well, how long would this run? And I timed everything and said, well, it came to either side of 6 hours, worth of material. I said, well, that's great. That's 12 half-hour episodes. That takes us from Memorial Day or the week after Memorial Day when the tour launched right up to Labor Day. It's a summertime series. Like just all the numbers just worked great
Hmm.
by getting one from everybody, two per show from Ringo. It is still his band after all, and getting it done, and it tells the whole story. Every tour is represented, every all-star is represented. I got to tell you, in putting this together, I compiled just the music to hear in the car to, say how would these line up? How would I group these? And the 71 songs, now 72 because of Buck Johnson. Um, I played them, in the car, just the music, and I said, "Oh my God!" I mean, it's an embarrassment of good songs. It's just an incredible set of songs. And when
Mm.
you go to things like, I don't know, one of the shows is British anthems or something like that, and you hear Carnival 9 and Whiter Shade of Pale and all the young dudes, it's like, oh my God. I mean, the set list, this long 70 plus song set list, it's staggering. It really is. I was telling Mark Rivera, I said, look, I long ago gave up on the hope of being the fifth Beatle. Okay, I've long ago given up on that. Can I be the 49th All-Star? Can I do that? This is the band I want to be in, to be in among all this. It's a staggering set of songs, and it should be when you look at the roster of guys and girls who have gone through the band.
Do you have interviews with all of the all-stars that have performed in the band that you can insert into the show just to talk about what that experience was like?
We have a lot that we were going to use because we get them from obviously from the Fab Forum, a ton of them, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, we've had so many of these guys on. We opted not to have those. We opted to have Mark tell the story.
Mm,
Again, it is a half-hour show. They are packed with music. Each show probably has 25 minutes of music in it.
mm,
With Mark doing, little voice tracks in between telling the story, setting things up. We wanted it to be a story told through the music rather than having music highlight, you know, a narrative story.
right. Because I was thinking it's very unfortunate that so many all-stars now have passed away.
Yeah.
It would have been nice to say, "Hey, I got Clarence Clemens here talking about what it was like in the first band or something."
Yeah.
Like that. And now Rick Derringer passing
Right.
away.
I mean, Derringer passed after we started recording the shows. I mean, this is the reality. I mentioned, many of these guys are in the Hall of Fame. One of them was named to the Hall of Fame or voted in. I guess the induction's coming up in a month or two. Um, Simon Kirke with Bad Company, the latest, all-star to say, "Yep, I'm in the Hall of Fame too."
Yeah,
So it's kind of a living, breathing thing, and we have music now right up to 2025. So it's it's something we're all proud of. Mark, was so easy to work with, and of course he's got great stories, and as I say, he adds that level of authenticity to things that is really, really refreshing to hear that voice and hear a different voice on the channel with us.
yeah. He's a great interview and very easy to talk to.
Oh yeah,
And sometimes people aren't aware that even today he is the music director when it
yeah.
starts. That,
Oh,
he's not in the band, but
yeah.
he's involved at the very beginning to make sure everything runs right.
Oh yeah, you can see him when Ringo posts those updates like, "Oh, we're getting ready to go out on the road," and they'll show little bits of rehearsal footage. He's in there and, working out the harmonies and working out, all the arrangements with the bands. He actually did it even outside the All-Star band. If any of your listeners saw the Ryman video, the two
Mm,
shows down at the Ryman, Ringo and Friends. Some of that backstage footage, you see Mark, working the parts out with Ringo.
yeah.
So there's plenty there.
Yeah. Is there any chance that I know you just mentioned the Buck Johnson and the Steve Lukather surprises? Are there any songs that were done during rehearsal that they didn't do in concert that they chose not
Yeah.
to give
Uh,
anything away?
well, yeah. I mean, it's not a giveaway. It's actually playing on this week and next week's show. The episode that's playing now, episode 3, came out so nice. We're playing it twice. It's going to run for 2 straight weeks. The week leading into Ringo's birthday, because we have that performance of Paul singing birthday and him playing with Ringo playing on it. And because his birthday falls on a Monday, that's the day new episodes launch each week for
Right.
this show. We said, let's run it both the week leading into the birthday and birthday week. So that's playing. We actually, in this week's episode, have Mark leading the band from 2003, leading them through a rehearsal, an acoustic rehearsal with 4-part harmonies, singing "Here Comes the Sun." I mean, and of course, it's framed with a story about, well, when you get all these disparate people all in one room and you're gonna jam to something, what are you gonna play?
Mm.
Beatles songs. So Mark tells the story really, really well, and it's a terrific run through, and you hear voices like Colin Hay and Paul Carrick and John Waite and Sheila E. singing "Here Comes the Sun." It's pretty awesome.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow, this sounds terrific. This is a 12-part series, right?
Yep. Right now, we're part 3 debuted this week, but because it's Ringo's birthday, we've got Ringo birthday stuff going on all week long. Every show, Apple Jam is Ringo centered, Across the Universe is Ringo centered. All of them are. We're actually rerunning episodes 1 and 2 in the mix. So anyone who may have missed them gets a chance to hear them. And of course, they're always on the app. If you're a subscriber, you can pull them up whenever you want. So,
Okay. This sounds
yeah.
exciting. I hope that you can go beyond 12
Oh, I
episodes.
mean, if they said, how'd you like to do another round? Well, I mean, we tried to pick the best, for this one. I, would I do it? Yes, of course I would do it. I would say though, look, we may have to go deep and you may have to, hit the vaults a little bit and get us something that maybe we don't have. Yeah, I know there's two Colin Haight tracks out there somewhere. Yeah, we can get another one of those, but you go to Graham Gouldman, well, we're going to need one more than you gave us already. We're going to have to go around one more time. So, depending on how much they might want to do a second round, certainly we'd be open to that.
Okay. Tremendous.
Yeah.
Um, Actually, part of the reason why we have Tom on is because I wanted to do a Fab Five show with him, which
Hmm.
will start in just a few moments. But before we do that, I just had a few general questions about the Beatles channel, which I
Sure.
haven't asked you yet. First of all, do they ever allow profanity in songs?
Yeah. I mean, we play big boys bickering. We
Really?
play
You don't bleep it at all the way
No,
through?
we don't believe working class hero, none of that. It's a little bit different, satellite radio a little bit different than terrestrial. It's not, we don't have the FCC to worry about and things like that. But that doesn't mean it's a free for all. Look, this year was a big year in the Lennon camp with the one-to-one video.
Right.
Sean has let the cat out of the bag there, saying we're going to get the whole box come October. And song one from sometime in New York City, the single.
Uh-huh.
You know, there's an old saying, not just at the Beatles channel, just in life. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And that, look, I mean, the way Cavett handled it back in '72 and said, this is not in the context of where it's most frequently known.
Right.
It is treating it as a point of sympathy in the eyes of feminism.
Right.
I get it. You get it. My guess is 99% of people watching this podcast get it.
Uh-huh.
You play this thing out there and there's, however many subscribers potentially listening, millions, and someone's going to say, you know what? I get in the car, I picked my 8-year-old up after school and we throw the Beatle channel on and that's what I heard. Again, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right.
So that's going to be an interesting one, though, because, even already with the movie having come out and that 4-song EP for Record Store Day, we've started, kicking up the whole one-to-one, get ready for sometime in New York City Lennon, motif going on a few of the shows. And it'll be interesting to see how much latitude they give us with that song.
Did you ever play it on the
Yes,
channel?
it has been played
Did
on
you
the
get
channel.
feedback? Did you get negative feedback for it?
It wasn't played on any of my shows. So
Okay.
if there was feedback, I didn't get it. And you know what? But a true story, when on one of my shows, the rarity show, Way Beyond Compare, will go, it doesn't have to specifically be, something out of a vault, but, live versions of songs you know and love
Right.
count. And, we did a couple weeks playing the new tracks from the new EP and, priming the pump for the one-to-one concerts. And I asked that question, you know, can, you know, can we? I said,
Yeah.
can you? Yes. Should you? Probably not. The fact that you're asking tells us you know the answer to that, you know? And I said, okay, I don't have to. It's not like I said, oh my God, I'm fresh out of material and I need 5 minutes to fill. That's not the reality.
Right.
They said, there's 1,000 other songs. Go pick a different one.
Hmm. It's just that I would think that this being the Beatles channel and one that the Beatles themselves and Apple they approve of,
Sure.
you should think, and there's no way on earth that you could ever tell me that Sean and Yoko would oppose your playing that song.
No, in
Want
fact,
that being
in
played.
fact, at the premiere of the one-to-one movie in New York, I had a chance to talk with Sean after the movie. There was a
Uh,
little, get together, and he was talking with a couple of guys from Elephant's Memory who were there.
yeah, who
So
I
we're
know.
having the yeah, you know them. They've been on your shows.
Yeah,
Gary and
Adam.
and that's what he was talking about. Again, a lot of your listeners are very, very enthusiastic and passionate. They know that there was actually a website, what, a year or two ago, set up for sometime in New York City, and all of a sudden it disappeared. And it's really one of the things that kind of gets in the way of how do you market that in 2025 differently than you did in 1972. It's weird, but it's more restrictive now. Um, it's what it is, and it's going to be something that will have to be dealt with when they roll this thing out. I mean, here's what I don't think they would ever do is just cut the song out. Don't think that's going to happen.
Hmm.
That's that would be weak. Um,
No, they have to release it in any kind of
of course.
sometime a New York City box set or one-to-one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh.
So to be determined. We'll see what happens as October gets closer.
How does your channel handle Yoko's music?
Actually, I think quite well. David Frick, who many of your listeners, I'm sure you know David,
Yeah.
two avenues here. One, he and I do a show called Apple Jam. It's a new month, every month, new show. We play Yoko pretty extensively there. Um, David has also done full hour-long specials, sitting down with Sean, going through Yoko's music. There's a great two-part it was a two-part interview, and two 1 hour segments where they went through and picked their most meaningful ones and why they chose these, and talked about the backstories and things. So, and it's not uncommon, certainly at Christmas. Listen to Snow Was Falling is in
Mhm.
semi-regular rotation there. But
Right.
I know when I cover, a non-specialty show, like if I'm filling in for Meg Griffin or something, it'll show up. Like I got 4 hours of a playlist in there, and
Uh,
oh my God, there it is. We're going to be playing Midsummer New York. Look at that. So yeah, she gets in there for sure.
very cool. Okay. Is there anything that, let me put it this way.
Okay.
There are certain things that, I wouldn't even expect the Beatles channel to play, like an entire side of electronic sound.
Yeah, that one. I don't know that we've ever played that. One, it's just a huge piece of music. It's what,
Right.
20 or 25 minutes per side. Um, if we've done anything there, we have a show dedicated just to George called Dark Horse Radio.
Hmm.
They may have played a sample of that, saying,
Hmm.
here's, it's, George's first, or I guess second, solo outing, was this electronic experimentation. Let's hear a little of that and find, a stretch that makes it a digestible dose. Long ones like that. I wanted to do this a couple of years ago on, um, I guess on Way Beyond Compare. Way Beyond Compare, for those that may not be familiar with it, is different versions of songs. We don't play any catalog stuff other than, I mean, we'll play non-LP B-sides. We will play CD bonus tracks.
Hmm.
We're playing things that aren't regular album cuts or
Right.
hits, right? Live versions, BBC, anything like that. It's got to be a little left to center, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of collaboration, right? So I just did a whole show on, Paul with George Michael, Paul with Steve Martin, Paul with fill in the blank, and that was to celebrate the new record, Paul with Barbara Streisand.
Right.
It's really not a rarity. It's brand new. You go to iTunes and 99 cents later or whatever it is, you're in. But we've added that song to the rotation, but wanted to just spotlight it's not a McCartney album track. This is something you won't find on a regular Paul McCartney album.
Right.
Barbara Streisand. And I love the duet, by the way. I think it added a whole new dimension to the song. I
Yeah.
really do.
Just
Um,
the two of them
anyway,
is worth it.
Yeah. What I wanted to do for one episode was go take the Fly on the Wall album. That's what, 20 minutes, 22
Yeah.
minutes, something like that. And just say, play one or two songs and then say, it's like 7 minutes after the hour. All right, one more track and I'm getting out of here. And then just tee it up and and go make a sandwich for 22 minutes and let that play. They're like, man, pick the musical parts out of that. Make a little montage out of it. We have played the Fly on the Wall thing in its entirety, but it's 22 minutes.
Hmm.
It's an investment of time for the listener. You have to remember the listener. Um, as I said before with the Ringo All-Star thing, someone who gets in the car and just wants to hear some Beatles music, yeah, you can sprinkle in, oh, listen, it's Ringo playing drums on Rocky Mountain Way by Joe Walsh.
Right.
Pretty cool. Okay. But not a half hour of it. Okay.
Right.
You got to break it up with the Ringo songs.
Okay. Have you ever played anything from Two Virgins, Life with the Lions?
Samples of those,
Yeah.
look, you get the wedding album, right? You get the John and Yoko side.
Uh-huh.
John, Yoko, John, Yoko, John, Yoko. After the 17th John, it gets a little repetitive. It's not something that you would play, all the time. It's still radio, and people ask, how come I hear Nowhere Man so much, but not, I don't know, Cry Baby Cry? Well, it's
Hmm.
because Nowhere Man was a hit. That's kind of one of the rules of radio. The hits get a little more visibility. Um, but we do play everything from the Beatles and the solo catalogs. Again, the experimental things like that. Again, are we going to play I guess that's side one of the wedding album, John, Yoko, John, Yoko. Are we
Hmm.
going to play all 20 minutes of that? No. A little sample of it? Yes, we have done that. I know I've included it. I write the show Across the Universe, which Dennis Elsis hosts.
Hmm.
And if we're talking about this week, it's John's experimental recordings. We'll say, and they included this as side one, to show the dedication of the whole, commitment to each other, and the intertwining, and you play a little bit of it and give people the idea, and then you come out and you play something else.
All right. Very good. By the way,
I knew there'd be a by the way in there somewhere.
I forgot to ask you, how do you like the new lineup of songs from Ringo? The changes. Look up in the set list.
Listen, that was to me the nicest edition. The reason is he hasn't done new music with the All-Star Band in many years. I mean, I think the last time they got on the road in 2017 did a little bit of Give More Love, did a
Right.
few shows, and that was it. So
Right.
actually, I remember having this conversation back in January down in Nashville when we went down there to see the shows at the Ryman. It was sort of, I don't want to say bittersweet. I don't know if that's the right word, but saying it might be the last time we hear him do new music, right? Because he's pretty much stepped aside from that with the All-Star Band. You have to credit Mark Rivera there. It's a long story, but he said, no, you have a hit album. It is a hit album. And you should be doing something from that. It was Mark really pushed for that.
Okay.
Yeah. And of
Good on.
course, look, we hadn't heard No No song in 20 years. I mean, that was kind of great. I mean, it's a hit and it was in all the early tours. And hey, it was great to bring that one back.
And Honey Don't.
Honey Don't, yeah, swapping out the Carl Perkins numbers in the opening spot.
Right.
Actually, that was one I didn't think when I heard that was the opener. I said, just he runs out on stage, everybody's up, yeah, 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 and then you think of the song, how come you say you will when you won't, and it breaks down, and it's like, uh, is it going to kill the momentum? No, they played right through. It was like, how come you say you will and you won't, and it just say you do, baby, when you do, and they played right through rather than break it down, which in the opening spot was certainly an astute arrangement to
Hmm.
do. So, yeah, so that was kind of cool. I enjoyed it. I thought it was good, the Radio City show. And what I was very encouraged by is when Ringo said, and it's not just Ringo saying this, anybody says this, I'm going to play one from my new album now. A lot of fans say this might be the time to go hit the facilities or go buy a t-shirt or get a beer or something. it was warmly received,
That's right.
and people dug it, and they stuck around, and they liked it, and it got a good reaction and a good round of applause, and people were singing along to it. That's how it should be.
Right.
Okay, that is how it should be. And again, God bless him, turning 85 next week. He has a hit album on his hands this year. Great stuff.
I always pay attention whenever I see Ringo or Paul. If they're doing new material, how does the audience react? And
Yeah.
I saw him in Bridgeport, the show right before Radio
I-
City.
mhm.
We're very respectful of Look Up.
Good.
So,
And of course, we saw him down in Nashville, at the Ryman. Now, that's a separate kettle of fish. It's not an
right,
all-star band show, and it was there to promote the new album, and you got three from the new album,
right.
and he was doing country arrangements of other songs and things like that. So, a little bit different, different expectation on the audience's part for sure.
Hmm. Okay. So what we're going to do right now is bring you a Fab Five show. I haven't done this for a while, but the whole idea behind this is for my guests to pick five albums. One is a Beatles album, and then there's one each from a solo Beatle that I call your go-to album of the moment.
Of the
What this,
moment, the
yes,
key,
well,
the key word there.
yeah. It's just like if I asked you what your favorite album was or favorite song was, it's still at that moment. You could
Yeah.
change your opinion a year from now or 5 years from now.
Yeah.
You may suddenly be in the mood when it comes to John to listen to Walls and Bridges, more so than an obvious choice like Imagine, for
Hmm.
example. But the important thing is you discuss why.
Okay.
Those are your favorite albums. Sometimes what I like to say is if you were going on a vacation and you're in a hurry and you had to just pick five CDs, one Beatles, one from each solo, what would you pick? What
Okay.
are you in the mood for now?
Okay. That I can do. Okay.
Okay. All right, so we're going to mix it up and we're going to start with George.
Okay. George, if I were going to grab one to go on vacation with right now, the one I'd probably grab is the 1979 self-titled album. I've always thought that that album was criminally underrated.
Uh-huh.
It's produced really, really well. Russ Titleman did a great job there. He's got great players on it, Winwood and everybody else. Um, Terrific songs. You even have an old Beatle Castaway, Not Guilty, but Love Comes to Everyone and Blow Away and Dark Sweet Lady and If You Believe, Your Love Is Forever. Lots of really well produced, well written songs. And, hey, it's summertime. I don't think I'd want to grab, the big bombastic all things must pass box and
Mm.
and go through the whole Phil Spector thing. And right now that might be a bit much. I think if I'm heading on vacation, the one I'd grab is the 79 uh self-titled.
Okay. All the material all throughout is strong and impeccably arranged.
Hmm.
Guitar playing is just so perfect.
Sure.
Finesse.
It's very tastefully done. Russ Titleman, as I mentioned, he was the producer on that. Really, really found George's sweet spot, I thought. The album has a consistent feel. You could tell these songs were a batch of one, as opposed to maybe some of the songs from albums just before that. Um, 33 and a third, or certainly the Dark Horse period, where the songs aren't uneven themselves, but placed against each other, they're more of a jigsaw puzzle, I
Hmm.
think. They're different stylistically, put it that way, as opposed to the self-titled. I think they all fit together really well.
Very interesting. You
Hmm.
know what? I just thought of a question. I don't think I ever posed this to anybody. But sometimes like on things we said today, and I have Darren DeVito on the show, he'll say when it's like the last few months of the year, I always think of John, and I start to listen to John.
That's true.
Birthday and the anniversary of his death.
Right.
Are there times when you think, well, All Things Must Pass came out the end of November? It's really a winter album. So I'm going to listen to All Things Must Pass that time. And whereas when I think of the George Harrison album, I think of spring, blow away,
Yeah,
sun
yeah,
coming out, you know?
yeah. It has a very springtime feel. You're right. And to answer your question, the answer is yes, but I typically find it with summertime records. So just this, this past spring, Record Store Day, we got that Venus and Mars
Hmm,
reissue, right? Don't ask me what I had for breakfast today, but you know what I remember about summer of 75? Listen to what the man said was everywhere.
right.
That was the record of the summer, period. So to me, Venus and Mars evokes a summertime feel just for that song alone. And I associate that with it. Um, Darren's point about, the end of the year. Yeah, especially once, the Christmas channels, probably sometime around Labor Day, start showing up. And you hear Happy Christmas, in regular rotation, which is Christmas record or no Christmas record. It's one of my five favorite John Lennon songs.
Hmm,
Just happened. It always was, always will be. And actually, I gave some thought to this Fab Five and go to albums. And actually, if we're done talking about the George record and you want to talk about John, the one, believe it or not, that's my go-to is Double Fantasy.
huh.
And there's a reason for that. I just mentioned 75 with Paul and listen to what the man said, big summertime record.
Hmm,
John stopped making records in the mid 70s. That's right around the time I'm starting to discover the whole Beatle thing. Okay. So I'm born in 62. So 1975, I'm 13.
hmm,
Okay. Right around then is about when you really start carving out your tastes, right? I was never excited about a new John Lennon record. When Plastic Ono Band came out, I was 8. Okay, that it didn't resonate with me. It didn't mean anything to me. But once I, really started paying attention and collecting it and reading about it and learning about it, I never had the experience of buying a new John Lennon record. Okay, I collected them. I went backwards. Okay, I got to get Imagine and I got to get Mind Games. I got to get Walls and Bridges. But Double Fantasy was the first John Lennon record I got to experience new.
hmm.
And I have some vivid memories of it. I was driving home from school. I was in college at the time, and it was AM radio. It was 66 NBC said, and coming up at 2 o'clock, we are going to premiere the new John Lennon single. I never drove so fast in my life to make sure I got home to
Uh-huh.
pop a cassette in to hear this thing. Um, and I remember that. And of course, everything that happens within a month or so of that release. Certainly, it's not the kind of stuff we want to remember, but we can't ever hope to forget it.
Hmm,
And those songs, once the album came out, yeah, I was like a lot of teenagers and said, okay, that Lennon song is over. Let's skip the next one, because it was John Yoko, John Yoko. But I came to like them, or some of them anyway. And over the years, I've come to really like them and
hmm.
appreciate them. So I listened to that record straight through. But I mean, I would be the first one to cop to, once Milk and Honey came out a couple years later, making a cassette
Hmm.
of guess what? All the John songs and having a full 1980 John Lennon album.
Right.
But back to the go-to point, look, to this day, four of the songs on there are still ranked among his most popular and very best. Starting Over and Beautiful Boy and Watching the Wheels. And the one that literally, how sometimes you say, gee, I love that song from the first time I heard it. From the first time I heard the first four strums of the guitar, the
Uh-huh.
suspended chord and the release. Dan, 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 dan. From what do you 3 seconds into the record?
Uh-huh.
From that point forward, it stood as my favorite John Lennon solo song. It's it is just a beautiful melody. The chord structure is so beautiful. The key change at the end just adds so much dimension to it. He sounds vulnerable. John sounds vulnerable in a lot of songs, but right there, he's celebrating the vulnerability. And that one, I remember, um, I guess it was 2020, where we still didn't have MTV yet. Okay. Uh, and the video for Woman, I think premiered, I want to say like Valentine's Day on 2020 or something. They made a big deal of it. And watching that, I think is when I really started to get more I don't know if sympathy is the right word, but watching all that footage of John and Yoko, I saw them completely differently than I ever had before. I saw them as a couple who were, guess what? They were 40. I mean, they may have been like Methuselah. 40, they were 40 years old, right? They're growing old together. And, yeah, I always knew John and Yoko. You know what that meant? Two virgins and sometime in New York City and bed-ins and peace rallies and everything else. Saw them in a completely different light. It was home movies and things of two people, not two
Right.
artists. And that has always kind of warmed me up for double fantasy. And much like Darren says, yeah, once it's back to school and football season kicks in and the weather gets brisk, it's kind of hard um, to get around. We celebrate his birthday, not just on the Beatles channel, we celebrate it, always have.
Hmm.
And you just know what's coming, a couple months down the line. And it kind of gets you into a John frame of mind for a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's something you and I have in common because Woman is my favorite solo Lennon song too.
Yeah.
I remember when the album came out and I was working in a record store I worked at the day that John was shot. And when the album first came out, everybody were all talking about the songs, and you would have thought, yeah, I'm a rocker. I'm losing you. That's got to be my favorite Lennon
Yeah.
song. But
Yeah.
I said, no.
Yeah.
And it reminded me very much of like, I think John called it, the adult version of Girl.
That girl grew up, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it was so Beatley, and I loved all the harmonies on it, and just
Yeah,
loved
no,
it.
it was so Beatley. I mean, the harmonies, the ringing, chiming guitars, the vulnerability. What could be more vulnerable than saying, "Please remember, my life is in your hands." You
Right.
can't be more vulnerable than that.
Right.
You just can't. And it was a side of John that I'm not the first person that ever pointed this out. Look, he when he had to start, picking on Paul about his, songs about home life and your misses and all that.
Hmm.
Well, he showed he could do it. He went right there. The whole album is
Right.
about celebrating home life and your misses and your family. And he did it with grace and he did it artistically and he did it really, really well. Those songs do hold up. They're not corny.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
they could have easily those songs could have easily not aged well, but I think they have aged
And to this day, I think Watching the Wheels is one of the greatest songs he's ever written.
brilliant. The thing I remember with watching the Wheels, there's a version I know you're familiar with it, and your listeners undoubtedly are the acoustic version. It's on the
Yeah.
acoustic album on the anthology. Um, for those who are listening who live in the New York area, they had done when we had the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame annex downtown. They did a thing about John and Yoko, and I remember staring at this. It was like an original sequencing of the songs for Double Fantasy, and Real Love was going to be on there and everything
Yeah,
else.
I remember that.
And next to next to um, watching the Wheels, it said Working Class Dylan because that was the version he was going to go with, was the acoustic version. Working like so he's marrying up Working Class Hero and of course, acoustic Dylan. And I love that demo. I mean, the finished version is a brilliant, brilliant
Yeah,
piece of work. But the acoustic demo there, some good stuff.
yeah. I know that for still a lot of people, because you so associate Double Fantasy with John's death, it's still tough to listen to for a lot of people. Is it still that way for you, or?
No, it's not. Of course, look, all you got to do is pick it up and you go, oh yeah, this is the one that came out when he died. Um, I kind of take it one step in reverse and say he went out A on top and B he went out happy. He sounded happy here. He didn't sound miserable like he did on some of the songs when he and Yoko were apart, 73, 74. Some of the songs on Mind Games and Walls and Bridges. He sounded happy. He sounded content. He sounded at peace. Look, I'm sure I view it way different now being, Ken, I'm now 40. No, I'm
Right.
no, being the age I am, I think my appreciation for it has matured over the years.
Hmm.
Just saying, okay, I remember when it came out, it was like, oh, couldn't they have put all John's songs on one song and Yoko's on the other?
Hmm.
Kind of like he did with Live Peace in Toronto or something. And at 18 years old, that was how I thought then.
Hmm.
Okay. I understand what that album is now. It's completely different than what I understood it to be at age 18. At age 18, it was these are the newest songs John Lennon has written. Let's hear them. Okay. Now I understand it and about the dialogue and the intertwining and what it was supposed to represent structurally as well as musically.
Hmm. Okay. And
Not okay. That'll
get,
be very good, sir.
getting back to your age, I'll put it to you this way.
Yeah.
As Ringo just changed the lyrics of I'm the Greatest live,
Yeah.
I'm way past 32.
Yeah. 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 Way past that. Yeah. No, no, coming up, there's that magical Beatle age that is getting dangerously close these days. But
I'm just a little past that. Just
yeah. Well, you see, the thing is, that's the difference between you and me, Ken. Every day right now, I'm getting closer and closer and closer to 64. And every day, you're getting further and further and further away from it. That's the
there
difference.
will come a time very soon when you'll be
It
further.
will be, it will be soon. Yes, yes, it will be soon.
Okay. Just one thing going back to the George Harrison
Hmm.
album. Curiosity here. Which version of Not Guilty do you prefer, the Beatles or George's?
I actually prefer the Beatle one. And again, it's with a great deal of rear view mirror. I understand what drove him to write it a
Uh-huh.
lot better now. It makes more sense as a current events statement. As recorded in 68. They're starting to fight. The guys are quitting the band. They're recording a lot of the songs for the White Albums, solo or in something less than foursomes.
Right.
And they're starting to splinter. And knowing that, I think color it informs it a lot better for me.
Hmm.
Um, it's a beautiful record the way Titleman produced it in 79. It's maybe just a little it goes down a little too easy for me. I like the record, and again, it's part of a collection of those 10 songs that I love and play well together. But knowing, look, in 1979, I didn't know the backstory,
Yeah.
when it came out. I don't even think we got to hear that song till years later. I don't
Right.
even think that was out yet on any of the bootlegs. I don't think it was.
Did it make sessions? I'm
It was
trying.
on Sessions, but Sessions is 85 or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so we didn't quite know it. I mean, we might have known of it.
Yeah.
He wrote this back in, when they were breaking up and during the White Album and all, but um, the more we know about that, the more it informs it. So I think I think the Beatle version kind of just clicks with me a little better.
Okay. I have a different view, but
Okay.
I understand your point of view. See, for me, I've always liked George's version better because I felt that that riff is just too repetitive all the way throughout. Da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da.
Well, that's
So many
a
times on
hundred and two
record.
takes in. That's what will happen. Yeah.
So it's more refined on the George Harrison version.
It's a better record on
Yeah,
the George Harrison album. It's a better sounding record.
right.
It's more polished. It's fully produced. The call it the White Album one is a little more biting, a little more stinging. But
Right.
I think that kind of informs the lyric a little better.
That's the thing. I mean, it's a bitter song,
Sure.
so it fits the arrangement of what the Beatles did perhaps better.
Absolutely.
The George
Absolutely.
version is it's very laid back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Both versions work for me. Anyway,
yeah.
let's go to Ringo.
Well, if I were going on vacation right now, well, believe it or not, the one I take with me is Look Up.
Okay.
I've been enjoying that record all year long. I've been working on a lot of Ringo things at the channel. Um, Not about the Look Up album, but because Ringo is seemingly he's had sort of kind of like a little bit of a renaissance in fans' eyes and a little bit of a rebirth musically, doing things
Uh-huh.
creatively with T-Bone. Right now, that's the one I'd probably grab. I think it's a consistently good album. I don't find any track on there where I go, gee, didn't he have anything better to do? Um, Yet I find, I just did a very extensive interview with Ringo covering every album from Buku of Blues to Look Up. We were
Wow.
there, we were there for hours. Okay. Um,
What
and
about Sentimental Journey?
I stand corrected from Sentimental Journey. I started with Buku of Blues. I actually started with Look Up, congratulating him on the success. I said, well, let's go back to 1970 because it's not your first country album. So we did them all.
Uh-huh.
It was interesting when we were going to do this. We said, we'd like to do a special about all your albums and get little ramps. Oh, when we recorded A Dose of Rock and Roll, Frampton came in and blah, 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 and tell the story, and then we get 30 seconds or 45 seconds of it and say Ringo remembers the song A Dose of Rock and Roll, and you play it and you play the song. And I was ready, to go, bananas. I mean, when's the last time he talked about Ringo the Fourth? I'm just curious, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, so, I'm brushing up and making sure I want to ask specific questions about specific songs. Not it, we're not going to get into who engineered, this song. It's not going to be at that level. It's going to be what do you remember kind of thing. And we got there and they said, oh, plan on having 45 minutes with him. And I said, hmm. I said, we've got 55 years
Uh-huh.
to cover in 45 minutes. I said, that's, she says, well, look, his interviews are normally, 15 and out. And I said, okay. So I'm kind of feverishly paring down, a lot of my questions and maybe doing them by era. Let's talk about your 70s albums, your 80s albums, whatever, and getting ready. Um, and it comes up that he's arriving and they're setting up his, his table and, his chair and lights to take a few pictures or whatever. And they said, well, he's going to need a table next to his chair. And I said, well, yeah, I mean, he could put his water bottle, right over here on the edge. They
Yeah.
said, no, 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 for all his notes. I went, okay, what? What notes? And his publicist said, yeah, the last couple weeks, he's been brushing up on the solo albums and has a bag of notes. I mean, a bag of notes. Ken, when you go to the grocery store, you get the little canvas sack there, whatever. One of those, I swear to God, this wide with notes about the albums. Now, a lot of it was Wikipedia stuff. It would just say, what year it came out, what songs were on it, just kind of touch points.
Right.
Okay. But he came in and he laid them out like, okay, let's talk about this album. And I'm looking at this saying, not a chance. We're going to get this done in 45 minutes.
Right.
And she says, well, if he's having a good time, maybe 50 or maybe an hour. Okay. If he's having a good time. It's
Yeah.
okay. And I'm proud to say that we went 2 hours and 10 minutes. And bless him, he'll be 85. Not so much as a a body break. No bio breaks, no nothing. We went through 2 hours, 10 minutes, album by album. All of them. All of them. And we got such good material out of them. Look, there was some things, again, if you're going to drill into who was the board engineer on this song, he's not going to know. And
Yeah.
for the purposes of this interview, who cares? What we wanted to get was good radio out of it, and we did. He told good stories. The outcome, fortunately, our VP Lou Simon came in after the interview and said, "Gee, guys, that was great." And he says, "Yeah, you got enough to do the ramps for individual songs. We got enough of those." He says, "But the stories he was telling would make no sense without you asking the questions." He
Right.
says, "We're going to have to take this and make either a 2 hour special or two 1 hour specials of us saying, and then we sat down with Ringo to talk about this album." So that'd be coming a little bit later in the fall. And once we get through All-Star series, that's all summer. We'll be working on doing this rather extensive look at Ringo remembering these albums. So it was, and I mean, at one point I thought it was a setup. Okay, I really did. I thought somebody said, "You want to see Frangione faint? Do this." We're in the 70s somewhere, and you know, I had my hand to God at the end of all the albums. It literally said, "If there's time, fill in with Son of Dracula and Scouse the Mouse." Okay. We're in 74, you're right around Goodnight Vienna time, and he says, "Well, don't you want to talk about Son of Drac?" I'm like,
Oh my God.
um, um, he went there. Okay, he went there, not me. Again, I think they must have put him up to it. That's all I can think. But we talked about Son of Drac. So, and of course, all you have to do is ask him to tell you Harry Nielsen stories, and you will get to Son of Drac, and you will get to Stop and Smell the Roses, and you'll get to all of them. He loved Harry. He still recalls Harry as his best friend, and talks about the music they did, and of course all the other projects they did, including Son of Dracula.
Wow. Talk
Yeah.
about a dream job.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, I've said this to people before. Some days at work are better than others. That was a pretty good one. Okay. We got 210 out of it. It was funny. We were getting toward, I guess it's like the 2008, the Mark Hudson era,
Hmm.
um,
How did he handle that?
with dignity. He said, I brought in a new producer and we started making these albums. And I mentioned because we didn't just close the book on each album. I said, this suite of albums, there was a suite of songs, Liverpool 8, The Other Side of Liverpool, In Liverpool, Rory and the Hurricanes. I says, is this, in lieu of writing your memoirs? And he said, I have no intention of writing my memoirs. He says, you can write my memoirs. You could start with the 5 hours of material you're getting today. No, I mean, he did that for effect, but literally he couldn't have been nicer. At the end, when we were done, he was very sincere. I know I've interviewed him before. You've interviewed him before. At the end, it's kind of like, okay, we're done and good luck with everything, and you're
Uh,
on your way. He was very good and sincere and took a few minutes with our team from Sirius, with Lou and myself, to say, no one's ever done the whole solo catalog before. Everyone wants to talk about the 8 years of my life.
hmm.
He says, I appreciate that you're doing this. He says, but I really appreciate the fact that people like Mickey Guyton are covering his songs because you guys play them. you're bringing it to a new audience. I said, well, that's what we do. I
Hmm.
said, we got the easy part. We just had to enjoy it. You had to make it and do it, and he was very appreciative of that. So, um, it was a good conversation with him, and he, it said, oh, and when it comes to knowing all the players and the albums, he says, your head is full of. I said, yes, I know, I'm full of it. That's for sure. Which he appreciated. But we had a good time, and he was very, very appreciative that we treated it with dignity, the hits and the non-hits.
Right.
We looked at them all. We went album by album.
Boy, that's
No, two
fun.
hours and 10 minutes with
Yeah.
with Ringo right through. No bio break, no nothing. We went right through.
Well,
Um,
I always thought that he would appreciate an interview like this because he, at times, as proud as he is of the Beatles,
yeah,
it's sometimes one Beatle question after another. And if you just focus on the solo catalog and ask questions that he doesn't normally are given,
yeah.
he's going to appreciate it.
Well,
And
one of the things that was cool, he told the story, not as part of the interview, but when we were having this conversation about, gee, I appreciate that you guys have, taken the time to do this. He said, look, I've been brushing up on the albums. He goes, now I got to get re-familiar with them all. I'll be listening to nothing else for the next 15 years, going back and hearing them all. He said, but we were in the car the other day, Barbara and I, and I asked Siri, she said, play Ringo Starr, and he said some of the songs were coming up and they were just like sparking memories. Like I heard Hey Baby,
yeah,
and I heard this and I heard that. And again, hand to God, it was over. We all thought everything went great. Lou and I jumped in the car to go to get back to the hotel. We throw the Beatles channel on, and what was playing? Hey Baby. I said, we got this. We got this. He was really great. And that was the same trip we were out there. We got that. We did a roundtable with the All-Star band. So it was Ringo, Mark Rivera, because it was going to be kind of not part of the new series, but kind of the launch to kind of get it out of the gate. So Mark kind of managed the roundtable. Greg Bisonet was there, Steve Lukather, Jim Keltner, and Joe Walsh was part of it. Keltner, I've got to tell you, I've never met Jim Keltner. I said hello to him once, like as he was leaving a room and I was entering, or vice
yeah.
versa. We had him on the Fab Forum by phone, so talked to him before, but never was in his company. That that was I can't say it's as thrilling as hanging with being there talking to Ringo, but it's Keltner, for God's sakes. I mean, he is a giant figure in the story. I needn't tell
Right.
you what a giant he is, and a really, really humble, down to earth, good natured guy. He was just very friendly, very appreciative, told some nice stories. But I just kept looking, going, I can't. I said, "Where's my Jim Keltner fan club button? I need that right now." Um, but he was great. I mean, meeting Keltner, that was worth flying out to L.A. I got to tell you, it really was.
Okay. Were Ringo's memories sharp of these albums that he made?
I think the notes helped him quite a bit.
Uh,
Um, there were times he had to refer to them. Like I was, all right, well, let's talk about I'm making this up, but the Bad Boy album. He rifled through and go, oh, okay, Bad Boy. Oh, let's see, who needs a heart? Hard Times,
mm,
Tonight, and he'd have to kind of reset to kind of get and say, okay, oh yeah, this is after the Arif Mardin albums. He talked about Arif and why can't I remember the head, and Amit Erdogan. He
yeah.
talked about them and you know how and why that deal came and went. He talked about going over to Portrait, and um, I had no problems telling him when I said, well, one of my favorite Ringo songs is on this album. I love Tonight. To me, that's just
Okay.
beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful record. And at one point, like I would do those, maybe I did it maybe 5 times in a 55-year catalog. And I think maybe the fourth time he said, you keep saying these are all your favorites. I said, well, they are. I don't know what to tell you. I said, these are some of my favorite records that you ever made. Um, so yeah, like if we were talking about Bad Boy, I'm sure I brought up Tonight in that discussion.
So was he shocked when you said that? That these were among your favorites?
Not shocked, but kind of um not shocked to go, oh my God, are you kidding me? No. But he would be like, really? That one? I said, well, yeah, that was a cover of who the heck did that song originally?
Forgot the name of the band.
Yeah, it was a band.
Featuring
It was a band, not an individual artist. Um, and I said, had that one come to you? I mean, it was a fairly current song. It wasn't like going back and doing Only You from the Platters from 20
right.
years earlier or something. Um, of course, when I told him about Sure to Fall being one of my favorites, I sure remember who did that one. Yeah, with Carl. He had just great things to say about Carl Perkins. I mean,
Right.
I could listen to people, praising Carl Perkins all day. That's a good conversation.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, we both met him. We both interviewed him together.
sure. Oh no, that interview was great. Now I told you that, the New York Times quoted that recently.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was incredible.
that's
Out
true.
of nowhere. Out of nowhere.
And uh, everybody now seems to know the whole story about my old friend and Paul
Yeah.
breaking down. I don't remember hearing that till it was in our interview.
Right. That was he had told it there in our interview, and it was at the same time. I don't know if it was a month before or a month after. He was a guest at a Beatles convention in Nashville called Beatle Days, and he told the story there. It may have been right before our interview or right after it.
Okay.
But it was at that time. It was, what's that, 96, I guess, right? It's,
Well, when Go Cat Go came out.
yeah, 96. Yeah.
Okay. Huh. Great guy. One of the nice people I ever met and interviewed.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
All right. Did he remember Ringo the Fourth at all?
He kind of had that one lumped in with Rotogravure, the two
Uh-huh.
Atlantic albums. We kind of talked about those two together.
Right.
And I did go down the road of, you know, was this Arif Mardin saying, no, we need to make you sound like what's happening on the radio now?
Uh-huh.
And I said, because I don't know, I look at that list of songs and I look at a song like, I don't know, Simple Love Song. That to me sounds like a Ringo Starr single. That's what a Ringo Starr single would be.
Right.
And I said, were you the one pushing for the disco sound on this? Was it him? He says, it would have been my call at the end. So
Hmm.
he copped to it. But I said, is that, I said, for in terms of singles, to me, Simple Love Song, of the, 10 songs that are on that album, that's the one that sounds the most like a Ringo Starr single to me. Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I always thought it should have been a single. I don't know if
Yeah.
it was first.
Yeah.
Um, I like Wings as a song. I
Yeah.
don't see it as or hear it as a hit, a big hit, but Simple Love Song with the strings at the very beginning was very Philadelphia Freedom-ish.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Well, what was interesting talking about Wings, I asked him, and I wish I got a better answer. I mean, the answer is what it is.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Said, the song Wings and Step Lightly. They're two songs that you've gone back and
Yeah.
redone. Was it because you said I didn't like how those came out, or I could do it better, or what makes you go take two, relatively obscure album tracks
Hmm.
and bring them out? Is it something you wanted to introduce the songs to a more current audience? I
Right.
was looking for them. And he said, "No, I just heard them and said, let's do those again." I was like, I wish I had more. Yeah. But there were times his answers were very on the surface, and there were times he pulled the curtain back a bit.
Okay. Boy, this is like your Playboy interview with John,
Yeah.
John Lennon one, song
Yeah.
by song. Although
Frangione remembers. Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, the Ringo interview, I mean, when's the last time he did 2 hours? The last 2 hour interview you heard with him.
I can't remember.
It was a lot of fun.
Hmm.
I mean, it was, and like I say, I was ready. I had the book. Yeah, I'm locked in. I'm ready for whatever they want to do. And then when I found out they wanted to do 45 minutes, it was bring the thing down. And then you
Right.
hear, oh, he's bringing a bag of notes. Well, let's open that window up a little bit more and just make sure. Here's the last thing I want to do was have him with all his notes, like saying, don't you want to ask me about this? Or, do you want to talk about this album a little bit more? Because I'm prepared to talk more about whatever, Goodnight Vienna or something. I
Uh-huh.
I didn't want to say, well, gee, I'm not prepared to talk about that record. That would just be like terrible.
Was, was he more excited to talk about Look Up or because of
um,
being in the new album, maybe he was more excited
I
about that?
started with that, so we had kind of a good, it was still high energy,
Yeah.
because we talked about that and said, well, let's go back to Buku and Sentimental Journey. Um, it was kind of cool, like when he starts singing parts of them. This was an interesting one. When we were talking about Sentimental Journey, I said, so these were the songs that your family used to sing. And he says, yeah, you'd have these parties and your aunts and uncles would be there and the songs you would sing. He says, and the one that always used to make my mother cry when I sang it. I'm like, good. Give it to me, right? And he starts singing, I'm nobody's child. And I'm going, okay, that wasn't on Sentimental Journey, but I know where he's going and I know why that would make his mother cry,
Right.
right? And I said, wow, that's really, really something. And I could see why that would make your mother cry. I said, but that song, now I have to put it on the record. I said, that song has a pretty interesting place in the Beatles story. The guys did it with Tony Sheridan back in
Right.
and then George did it with the Wilburys, 25 years later. He goes, he did? And I'm like, yeah, he did. He says, where did he do that? And I said, it was on I tell him about the Romanian Angel Appeal. And he's like, what year was that? So these were things, no, again, you and I take that for granted.
Uh,
Okay. What year the Romanian Angel Appeal album came out, that's not in his wheelhouse. But
right.
he asked those questions. And when I told him, he's like, is that right? I said, look, I swear I would not make that up. I wouldn't lie to you. But he kind of got the idea. I didn't try to dazzle him with trivia throughout the whole thing. But,
Right.
look, he opened the door to Nobody's Child. He's remembering the song.
Right.
It seems like the place you have to paint that corner.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, you just made me think of something else. We'll get to Paul, I promise you.
Well, we're going to pick my favorite Tony Sheridan album. What are we going to?
No, no, no. Since he didn't seem to know about the Traveling Wilburys there, when Ringo recorded and released his version of Grow Old With Me,
Hmm.
he never made a reference to the fact that John had already, well, posthumously, it had been released.
Yeah.
It made me wonder, did he ever know the song? And not only that, it was supposed to be one of four songs
Right.
that the Beatles were handed for the Beatles anthology. There's no reference to it whatsoever.
He talked about Jack Douglas giving him a cassette
Right,
of, these songs where John would say, this would be a good one for Ringo. And we hear him say that exact thing right
right,
before, I guess, what, Nobody Told Me or something. This will be a good one for Ringo. Um, Apparently that was on that cassette that Douglas gave him.
right.
So but yes, theoretically, he should have known it from when the mid 90s, from when Yoko gave them the cassettes to work for the anthology.
Well, I would
But
have thought he would have heard it on Milk and Honey.
yeah, it's if I had another 2 hours and 10 minutes with him, I'd like to ask him about, the other Beatles albums? Much like you're asking me, yeah, what's your go-to McCartney album? I'd love to ask him that question.
Sure.
That'd be kind of cool.
That's one thing we didn't get that much of from the four Beatles is their commenting on the others' music. There's a few.
Except when they were fighting.
All right, so let's get to Paul now.
Okay, well, I've been on this show often enough, and going back to the WDHA days, my all-time favorite
Hmm,
album by any of the Fab Four is Tug of War.
right.
But we're not picking my favorite albums right now, are we? We're picking, your go-to for right now. If I were going on vacation, what's the one I would grab? Right now, it might be Venus and Mars. And the reason is, as I said before, I have kind of this summer association with that album.
Hmm,
Um, if for nothing else, listen to what the man said.
hmm,
That was just an enormous, enormous record. And that's right at that time. I'm 13 in the summer of 75. You all can do the math later.
uh-huh,
That's right about when I'm discovering what it's all about. And this is now a current song. It's not, I didn't have to go back and say, oh, this was maybe I'm amazed. That was from a few years ago. This was Uncle Albert from a few years ago, or
hmm,
Band on the Run from 2 years ago, whatever. Um, it was, oh, new Wings single. Cool. Okay. New Wings singles became a very big presence in my high school years, particularly the ones that weren't on albums. So like Girls' School, Mull of Kintyre, all of those.
hmm,
Those be Junior's Farm. These became like events. You had to go get the single.
right,
Okay, you had to. And as a new Wings single and something I was just really discovering. I mean, again, I was 13.
right,
So it's the first time there's let's call it a new Wings single that where I'm now somehow I'm playing in that sandbox.
right.
Um, I mean, I knew Jet and Live and Let Die. I heard them on the radio a million times,
Hmm,
but I wasn't quite I hadn't quite made that full plunge into Beatledom, collecting them,
right.
reading books about them, studying them, learning their songs on guitar, whatever it might be that really immersed me in that. That's really the first one, and it is a huge summertime record. So if I were grabbing the gear right now, it might be Venus and Mars.
So even as a little kid, you weren't buying, I know you probably didn't have that much money as a little
Yeah.
kid on records, but you weren't buying Beatles singles.
Well, no. I mean, Beatle records were in the house from the time we were 2 and 3 years old.
Uh-huh.
Our babysitters. We lived in New York and on a floor with, three other apartments. They all had teenage girls.
Uh-huh.
Beatle music was in the house. It wasn't like I never heard Beatle music.
Right.
I knew it. I liked it. I had the blue and red albums, but I had not said, this is it. This is where I'm going to be, casting my lot. I was 12 or
Right.
13. Um, Money? No, I mean, I had paper route money. That's what I had. And if that meant buying a new cassette every week, I'd go get a new cassette every week. This is when I start collecting them. Yeah,
Right.
had I ever heard the song Let It Be? Of course I had heard Let It Be.
Right.
But I didn't don't in 1974, if you asked me what year Sergeant Pepper came out, I probably wouldn't have been able to tell you.
Right.
Okay, I'm just not of that age yet, and I'm not of that level of fandom or collecting or learning about them yet. This is when it starts, when I'm about 13.
Yeah. See,
Yeah.
for me, I always tell people it's 1973 for me because even though as a
Well,
little
you're
kid,
just a couple years older than me. That makes sense. That's about when you were 13, right?
yeah, but
Give or
I
take.
I had the Beatles records. I bought them I guess, fairly close to when they came out. Even as a little kid, I went to the record stores, I went and bought them. And same thing with the early solo Beatle albums, but 1973 is when I got them
Yeah.
pretty close to when they came out.
Right.
Every single one of them.
Yeah, I'm not getting there till 75-ish, 75-ish. So yeah. But yeah, that's a great summertime album that Listen to What the Man Said sounds as good today as it ever did. And I mean, there's brilliant songs on the thing, top to bottom.
Uh,
The ending medley, after Listen to What the Man Said, Treat Her Gently, Lonely Old People is
yep.
epic McCartney. Epic McCartney. You got your rockers. You've got Rock Show. You've got Magneto and Titanium Man. You've got Medicine Jar. You've got Letting Go. I mean,
Right.
you know how many songs are on now. I might have to tell you the names of them,
Right.
but yeah, that record top to bottom. And the only thing I liked better than the songs on Venus and Mars is when he did them live and they came out on Wings Over America. Look, as good as those songs are on Venus and Mars, and they are good, Letting Go live is a completely different experience.
Yes.
Even something simple like You Gave Me the Answer is a completely different listen in the live album.
My next to most recent show with Beatley Tone is us talking about the same thing. Because
Yeah.
we've been doing shows for Venus and Mars since the 50th anniversary.
Yeah.
And it's also the fact that the Band on the Run material, Venus and Mars, and Speed of Sound, those songs, for whatever reason, work great live.
They
You
did, and even he only did, if I'm getting this right, I'm sure if I don't get it right, someone will point it out. Um, Pre-Band on the Run solo stuff, he did two songs on Wings Over America. Maybe I'm Amazed and My Love. Is that about it? That's about it. Oh, and Hi, Hi,
Wait a
Hi.
minute, from Band on the Run?
No,
Band on
no,
the Run, Jet?
pre-Band on the Run
Okay.
solo material. And Hi, Hi, Hi for the encore.
Okay.
Right, that might be the
Maybe I'm
only.
amazed. Did you say maybe I'm amazed?
Maybe I'm Amazed, My Love, Hi, Hi, Hi. Might that be all of them from pre-band on? I mean, the live album is largely Band on the Run, Venus and Mars, Speed of Sound in terms of solo
Right.
music.
Yeah.
I think that it might just be those three.
Right.
But even all three of those sounded way better live, I thought.
Yeah. Well, most of them, I
I
think.
thought McCulloch was just he took things to a whole nother level. Jimmy was just a great, great guitar player.
Oh, yeah. And forgive me for not remembering. You saw him in 76.
I did not.
You didn't?
I did not. Ken, let's do the math. Okay. My birthday's in July. So 76. Okay. Remember, I don't live in New York. I live in New Jersey. How was I getting there? Just out of curiosity.
I don't know. I would have gotten my parents to take
Yeah.
me.
Now, as I remember it, and this might not be exactly true, but it's true at least in spirit. I was still in eighth grade. I wasn't even in high school yet. So going to concerts in New York was not something that was an automatic. My first concert was until I was actually in high school, fall of 76. I got a good first one. I got Frampton Comes Alive. That's a pretty
Okay.
good one. But yeah, I missed Wings by 5 months.
Missed it by that much.
That much, yeah.
Wow. Because I think in some ways, seeing Wings live in 76 affects your judgment of those previous albums. So, I mean, I love those albums, and I love Paul as a studio, the studio albums and the versions on the studio albums. Although I did say that I think Listen to What the Man Said is probably the only song from Venus and Mars that was better in the studio than
I
live.
I would agree with that.
Yeah,
I would agree with that, yeah. But
but
like letting go and all that and call me back again. I mean,
uh-huh.
McCulloch, he sounds like Clapton playing those little repeat phrases in between the vocal lines. I mean, brilliant, brilliant guitar player.
Mm.
Brilliant guitar player.
Yeah, I'm glad to see more people are appreciating Venus and Mars. And
Yeah,
I'm hoping that all these box sets that have come out through the years has given people, it's caused reappraisals of so many of these.
sure.
So,
Well, we'll I guess we'll get to to judge that in spades come the fall, right? I mean, the new Wings, the book, there'll be, I'm sure they'll have some sort of accompanying something, right, to go with it. So maybe this will be like Wingspan 2 or something. I don't know.
What's your prediction at this point for London Town Back to the Egg?
Maybe before I'm 84, we'll get those. I mean, I know they're done, right? Lawrence has told the story at the fest. They're done. They remastered the live, was it Glasgow show, the whole bit. They're done. They've done the interviews. They've done everything. I know people ask us that all the time. We get callers on the Fab Forum, to get those two albums. I've heard nothing, nothing in terms of those. But I mean, these okay. We've gone, Ken, from okay. I didn't see Wings in '76. I'm starting to collect. I'm starting to get the bug.
Uh-huh.
Those those albums, London Town and Back to the Egg, I cut school to go get those. Okay. So it happened and it happened fast. But those are records that those records meant a ton to me in the
Right.
'70s and in high school. Those were huge, huge records for me.
Yeah, I can relate.
As was McCartney too. I mean, that was the summer or the spring that I graduated high school, 1980. Coming up was the record.
You ever notice that so many of McCartney's hits came out in the spring and summer?
Hmm.
You think it's a psychological thing? These feel-good songs, and it just so happens the weather's nice and it's spring.
Yeah. It worked. They were both those two songs are both number ones last I looked. Listen to
Which
what my
ones?
man said and coming up. Both
Oh
of them
yeah,
at the top. Yeah.
yeah. My Love
Yeah.
was summertime or
That's
springtime.
spring. That's spring. Yeah.
Yeah. Live and Let Die is the summertime.
Yeah.
Little Luck was summertime, spring.
Spring into summer. Yeah.
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 Let's see.
Yep. You bet.
More that goes into these records than meets the eye.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
All right. So this has been great. George Harrison, Double Fantasy, Look Up, and Venus and Mars, your choices. And
Of course, if we did this 1 week from tonight, you'd get four different answers. You understand that, right?
okay.
Okay. Yeah. You understand that, right?
That's because this catalog is so solid.
You think? You think?
There's so much great stuff to go back on. There's so much that you find, well, you haven't listened to this one for a while. Let me revisit this one. Of course, when you're doing radio shows on the Beatles every single week and you're around this music every single week, this music isn't too far away from you.
I know. No, it's part of what we do every day.
Yeah.
Um, we're doing Fab Five.
Yes.
Look,
Oh,
Ken,
I forgot.
I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I'm not the dumbest. Okay.
All right.
Because
Now,
that one I actually have a good answer for.
okay.
That one solid. And guess what? It has to do with it coincidentally is a summer record. Because I sure don't remember when A Hard Day's Night came out. I
Okay.
was two. Okay. So I can't say, oh, that summer, that was a good one. Yeah, no.
It's no
But
excuse.
yeah, A Hard Day's Night. Look, probably my favorite Beatles album, probably is still Abbey Road. But A Hard Day's Night, I always said it's cut for cut. I mean, there's no bad song on. There's no song I ever skip. Well, I mean, how many do I skip on? I don't know, Rubber Soul or Help. The answer is the same, none. But it is a collection of really good pop songs. And I get the vision in my head of, the ones that are from side one from the movie, and
Hmm.
all that. But there are no covers on there. They have taken leaps and bounds. I think, Please Please Me to With the Beatles was a sizable jump. Not just because they were doing less covers and things, but John's writing in particular. was getting very sophisticated already. Third album, no covers, no Ringo vocal. And that's not to say, oh, no wonder it's a good record. No, that's not what I'm saying here. But you had the three principal vocalists doing their thing. Um, McCartney's writing, you know, incredible stuff. Things we said today. Can't buy me love. I mean, he
And I
comes
love
to
it.
the he comes to the party too,
Yeah,
right? But they have really gone from what is it, March of '63, the first album, to July of '64 in less than a year and a half. There's a great maturity there in their writing.
right.
Just in their song, it's still all pop songs, but they are of the highest quality and the highest caliber. Songs like I Should Have Known Better.
Mm,
I mean, there are songs where when I hear them in the car, I like pound the steering wheel going, how the hell wasn't this a single? This would be a monster record. A
mm,
song like Tell Me Why would have been, in my estimation, a monster record. Okay. From that first drum fill coming in, the blaring harmonies, the whole thing.
mm,
And again, I mentioned before, seeing the movie in my head when I listen to these songs, I've often said if somebody came off a spaceship or something and just had never heard of the Beatles and said, tell me what Beatlemania was about. Okay. That concert scene in A Hard Day's Night, they open with Tell Me Why,
mhm,
which, P.S., is a song they never played live. Not in concert, not for the BBC, not for anything.
right.
Okay. Yet, when they hit the stage in this mock concert,
Yeah.
the entire the entire thing just gels. The entire movie, all the goofing off and the train rides and all that, they get down to what they're doing. Ringo is just is just killing it in that song. You know, even look, for years, those absurd statements like Ringo got lucky, Dylan can't sing, and Yoko broke up the Beatles. Well, people got to get past those things, right? It's an absurd statement to say that Ringo, that he was an interchangeable part.
Uh-huh.
You want to know how little an interchangeable part he is? Go to that song. Okay. Go to that song. I mean, you can go to a million of them. You can go to some BBC stuff. You can go to Sit Down and Cry Over You. There's a million places you can go.
Right.
But as a song drummer, what they call a song, and you hear people like Greg Bisnet and Keltner and, you know, drummers say Ringo was a great song drummer. He served the song. Go
Hmm.
listen to Tell Me Why. That's that's what a great song drummer does.
Yeah. Well, sometimes I say, go to all these Beatles tribute bands that don't copy what Ringo does.
Yeah.
You realize how much you're missing of what Ringo could do.
Oh, you bet. You bet. My favorite in that, did you ever see the book, or maybe you have it in that big bookshelf behind you? The book Postcards from the Boys. Remember that
Yeah.
book?
Yep.
Okay.
I have it.
My favorite is the one. Oh, it's like a favorite only because of the postmark on it. It's postmarked the day after the rooftop concert, January 31st, 1969. And it's Paul's handwriting. It says, "You are the best drummer in the world." Really.
Hmm.
That's all it said. There's a reason for that. There's a reason for that.
We did a show on my channel, should have been singles.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And we did one for the 60s, we did one for the 70s. Not sure if we did one on the 80s, but I know like in my top three of Beatles songs that should have been singles, Anytime at All is in there. I mean, how on
Great.
earth that
Great.
the thing is they had so many songs out at the same time on the
I know.
charts, you couldn't put everything out as a single.
Right.
So, but that you're gonna lose that girl. How could that
Incredible.
have been a hit? You know?
Incredible. One of my favorites, and gee, all of a sudden it proved to be true. Got to get you into my life. Well, they put it out 10 years later, it went in the top 10.
Yep.
I mean, Would have been a monster record.
Right.
Monster
Uh-huh.
record.
For all the hits the Beatles had, and they had more than any other band, they could have had twice as many.
That's right. There are, I mean, look, you got 30 tracks deep on the White Album with no single. Okay. How many of those could have been singles? I can
Mm.
think of a handful.
Yeah.
That could have been.
Sergeant Pepper didn't have any singles
Right. Right.
when it came out.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the thing. And A Hard Day's Night is such an exciting record to this
It
day.
is.
It like
It
leaps
is.
off the stereo
Oh,
because
yeah.
every song sounds fresh.
Yeah.
The other songs didn't, but it's like every song. And even the
Yeah.
ballads are so, like you said, sophisticated.
They are. They're really good. I mean, you get, I mean, If I Fell, they're venturing into, I mean, they had great harmonies on the first two albums and that initial batch of singles, of course. They get to If I Fell, it takes it to a whole nother place.
Hmm.
Whole nother place. A whole nother place. And songs that even their composers said that was a throwaway. I'm happy just to dance with you. Monster, if it was a single, would have been a monster record. A
I
monster record.
I always bring up John said, "And Your Bird Can Sing" was a throwaway.
Yeah.
There are bands that would kill
Yeah.
to write a song like "And Your Bird Can Sing"
Yeah.
and have it come out that way with that arrangement. Yes, it
Even
is. Yes, it is was a rewrite of This Boy.
yeah.
Yeah, this three-part harmony, but
Yeah, right. Yeah.
it's that's a gorgeous song. Yes, it
Well,
is.
sure.
Yeah.
Sure it is. Sure. No, I mean like the Help album, 65. Look, 1965 is just an incredible year for every corner of pop music, but
Uh-huh.
the songs on the Help album, you mentioned You're Gonna Lose That Girl. Again, would have been a monumental level single. Um, the night before, Another Girl.
Yeah.
Come on already. You know, come on.
Come on, people.
Yeah, no, it's staggering when you get down to it. But yeah, so for Fab Five, it would be the Hard Day's Night album.
Okay. All excellent choices.
Yeah, yeah, there are not any bad ones in there, that's for sure.
Oh,
Yeah,
there are very few bad ones to pick from,
yeah,
if any.
yeah. If
I
any.
find something in all the albums to appreciate. So
Well, good. This has been a blast.
yeah. So thanks so much for doing this. And
Sure.
I will put the link to the SiriusXM channel here. Check
Excellent.
out the 32 shows that Tom is now writing or hosting.
Yeah.
You'll be hearing his voice. It's wall to wall Tom.
Well, the fun part, look, I host two, I co-host two, and I write, counting the new Ringo one, which is it's a mini series. It's going to have a start. It's going to have an end.
Hmm,
And I write too for other people's voices.
right,
So it's a little bit different, but the new one, help from my friends Ringo and his all-star band, is really it's something we're really proud of. As I say, I write that one. I actually served as producer. It means I got to pick the songs and pick the host and whatever and write the scripts. But Mark Rivera adds a whole new dimension to what we do on the channel.
hmm,
So, having him there as a different voice, as an authoritative voice, and he's telling a story that it has gone way too long without being told,
right.
especially in radio. I mean, it is a staggering body of work, staggering. And I went back and listened to some of these. Admittedly, I hadn't listened to, I don't know, the 1995 tour disc, top
Right.
to bottom in a while.
Yeah.
I'm going, my God, like Felix is doing grooving, and then you
Hmm.
get taking care of business, and then Rivera is doing I'm Your Captain with Mark Farner. I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah.
where do you throw a dart at this thing? Just great stuff. So hopefully people get a chance to hear that. It's playing this week, going into Ringo's birthday and the week of Ringo's birthday. You can hear all three of our first three episodes. they'll be on the app and new episodes every Monday. And then they go into their rotation as well, 3 times a week. It's on Mondays at 11 a, Thursdays at 1 p.m., and the following Sunday 5 p.m. So you get 3 chances to hear it on the radio. But again, the app, if none of those times work, that's a place to go. But if you want to really get a feel for what the show is about, episode 3 that's out there right now, uh, kind of special. We want to do something special for his birthday, and I think we got it.
Okay. One last question.
Yeah.
Of all the All-Star Band tours that you've
Oh, this
seen,
is dirty pool.
no, well, you and I have been to every tour,
That's right.
you know? So many incredible lineups. It's easy to just default to the first one because it was the first one, and he padded it with so many
Oh, no.
All-Stars.
Well, he told that story. He was like, I called up, Joe Walsh, and he said, yeah, sure, I'm in. I called up Levon. Sure, I'm in. I didn't think everyone was going to say sure. I called
Yeah,
Dr. John. He said, sure. He says, and before I had to stop making calls.
yeah,
He says, because just everybody said yes. Um, and Walsh told a nice story in the round table about that. He said, yeah, a lot of us knew each other from studios and, being on the road and things like that, but we never had a chance to play together. And it took something like this to do that.
right.
Um, yeah. I mean, I remember the first one, saw it in Atlantic City, and Ringo comes down front and he's doing it Don't Come Easy and, whatever. He goes behind the kit and then, whatever Dr. John is doing, like Iko or something. And
Yeah,
Joe Walsh is doing whatever he's doing, Life in the Fast Lane or something. I'm going, why aren't they doing something from Old Wave? Ringo and Joe played to get on that. And then, like by the time you get to The Wait, or Will It Go Around in Circles, you go, oh, I see what they're doing. Ringo gets to play drums on Rocky Mountain Way. Got it.
uh-huh.
And when you realize what it's all about, I mean, it's just incredible. Just incredible.
Yeah.
But so the question was going to be,
Your favorite lineup?
I got to tell you, the second lineup was great. The one we were just talking about. Felix, Mark Farner, Billy Preston, John Entwistle, Zach. It's a nice band. That's a nice band.
Was that with Dave Edmonds?
No, Dave was the second one.
I
Uh,
thought you said the
no,
second.
I'm sorry. This is the third one,
Oh,
1990.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Dave was the second. That was the guitar army. Could we get one more guitar player up there? Yeah, when they were all up there playing guitars. Yeah, 95 was the third band, right?
Yeah.
Uh, I like that one a lot. First one, look, how could you not, right? It was loaded. The 97, I guess I'm going to go through them one by one. 97, the all British one with Frampton and Jack Bruce and Gary Brooker was great.
Yeah.
Great. Um, Now there hasn't been one where I said, gee, I wish I didn't have to go tonight. They're all good.
It's pretty amazing. I'll
Yeah.
just tell you my favorite one.
Lay it on me.
Ian Hunter,
Oh,
Ward Jones, Sheila E.
Sheila E.
Greg,
Greg Lake. Greg Lake. Yeah.
I
It's a
forget.
great one.
It's just I love eclecticism. Part of
Yeah.
why I love the Beatles.
Yeah.
To go from In the Court of the Crimson King to The Glamorous Life.
Well, you have to hear Mark. Mark tells a story about Court of the Crimson King and
Yeah.
how that got in the set. Um, I that one is still coming, so I'm not going to do a spoiler other than to tell you he has a great story that wasn't a song Greg Lake wanted to necessarily do. It's not like he didn't want to do it, but he said, "Why that one?"
Uh-huh.
And Rivera was like, "Why that one? 'Cause it's iconic. That's why." But I think Greg wanted to do In the Beginning in its
Right.
place. Of course, they were going to do Lucky Man, Big Head.
Right.
I mean, very well known. Um, but yeah, and of course, Carnival 9 was going to be the mid-show, spotlight with Howard. Told great story about Howard and Sheila on that one. Yeah, so when we get to that one, the British rock anthem installment of our series, Mark has a great story about Greg Lake and choosing those songs. And it was weird. look, this thing inherently involved a lot of checklists. How many tours? How many people? How many have been in more than once? How many songs did they do? Inherently, there's a lot of lists. And I made one of the lists. I'm looking at it right now, Ken, of all-star band members who have been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and those who have not. The ones who are in, you say, well, of course they're in. You know, why wouldn't Levon Helm and Joe Walsh be in there? Of course they're in there.
Hmm.
The list on the other side of the page of people who are not in, I look at this thing and say, that's insane.
Hmm.
How are the Guess Who not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Okay. Randy Bachman stands a chance to be in twice.
Yeah.
Okay. Because if Bad Company can go in, BTO sure can. Okay.
Yep.
By the way, I think both should be in for what that's worth. Okay. But how is Paul Carrick with everything he's done? Not in the Rock and Roll Hall, not with Squeeze, not with anybody. How's that possible? I mean, Toto, Supertramp, Squeeze,
Oh yeah.
Randy Funk, Mott the Hoople. I mean, none of these bands are in the rock. Greg Lake, okay, you'd think he'd have a shot between ELP and King Crimson. You'd think he'd have a shot. What's that about?
Well, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame have been very slow at recognizing progressive
You're
rock.
not kidding. What
Like,
about the Raspberries? Should they be in there?
what's that?
Should the Raspberries be in?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Okay. It's insane, some of the ones that aren't in there.
You know, I mentioned that band, my favorite one, but I forgot to say, since you brought up Supertramp, Roger Hodgson was in that lineup.
Oh my God.
Amazing.
Amazing. No, amazing.
Just to hear the Logical song was
Yeah.
worth it to see that
Yeah.
in concert.
I think that's the one I picked from him for this series.
Okay.
I think. Did I do that or give a little bit? I think I did Logical Song. Yeah.
As
Yeah.
Paul would say, that's a good one.
That's a good. Well, look, that we weren't at a loss for good ones.
Yeah.
That's for sure. The hard part was okay. I don't know. You look at Felix Cavaliere. He brings three number one Rascal singles to the table. Pick one. I mean, you
All
pick one.
gotta be free.
Would not have been a bad pick.
Yes. Yeah.
I went with Groovin'.
Okay.
You know why I like that one? Because in the middle, because they have nothing else to do. That's not a good enough song.
Uh-huh.
They break into a verse of My Girl.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, why? Because we need one more hit record up here. You know.
If you've ever seen Felix do a solo show, he goes into a whole medley of songs.
I'm sure. Yeah. No, I mean, look, this thing's it's got the hits. Don't worry. You tune into the Help from My Friends show. It's not like you're gonna go, "Well, I don't know that one." You know, it's plenty of hits, plenty of hits.
Okay. Well, this has been fun, as it always is.
It always is, Ken. Thank you for inviting me.
And a reminder to check out this new show and the entire Beatles channel at SiriusXM. And feel free to comment for everything we've been talking about here. And thanks to all of you for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already. And thank you, Tom.
My pleasure.
And peace and love.
Peace, love. RX.
Happy birthday, Ringo.
Happy birthday, Ringo. Many, many, many more.
Okay. Take care.